It's my birthday. And this year I'm celebrating it a little bit unusually, celebrating in inverted commas. I was having a discussion with someone the other night, a very lengthy discussion, and she has ADHD. And after a very lengthy discussion, 5 hours or so, it became quite possible that I myself have ADHD or something resembling it. I've since gone down the rabbit hole, which apparently is a very ADHD thing to do, and started looking at symptoms of ADHD. And I will say it's very important that you don't self-diagnose, which I have to try and stay away from that temptation. But one of the things, and I think I want to be very, very careful, because I think there's a temptation with the neurodivergent community as a whole, let's say, to view neurotypical people as being boring and in a very dismissive way. And I've always kind of thought that for myself, the worst insult you could use on me is to call me normal or typical. So that might be a sign. But I think you have to be very careful when a label gives you a sense of significance or importance, particularly if you're going to call neurotypical people boring, then inherently you're taking some pride from the neurodivergent label, and then that might short circuit your recovery or your coping mechanisms. So, but one of the things that a YouTube video I was watching the other day in terms of signs that you might have adult ADHD. Now I wasn't hyperactive as a child, and quite frankly, I was probably the opposite. And as a tennis coach, when I was just beginning, I had this stereotype in my head of someone who had ADHD was a child who'd had too much red sugar, running around out of control. And it turns out that can be the hyperactive part of it, but there are other forms of ADHD that are much more subtle, harder to detect, and more so there's more ways of ADHD manifesting than simply someone who can't sit still and can't pay attention. But this video said that one of the things that might be a clue is that you've always felt different. Now, again, you can look at some of these things and go, well, doesn't everyone feel different at times? And yes, that's certainly the case. But I certainly have always felt very, very different. I've always thought that I thought differently. And I think going back to last year, or was it the year before, when I interviewed Miss Earth Denmark, Cecily Dissing, who has, if I'm not mistaken, ADHD, Asperger's, and synesthesia. And we had this really long interview, which was a very winding interview, which I don't think many people would have been able to follow. And then we had a very long discussion afterwards. And she brought up this idea of hyper focus. And I'd never heard of that until this point. Remember, as I said, my idea of ADHD was someone who can't pay attention. Well, it turns out the flip side of that is hyperfocus, which means that when someone who has ADHD finds something interesting, they can lose hours and days of their lives into it, and you can't break their concentration. I heard a story, I don't know if it's true or not, but there was this person who was in a state of hyperfocus, and her house was on fire around her, and she didn't realize until the firefighters broke down the door. That to give you an idea, that's the flip side of ADHD, is this hyperfocused state. But long story short, getting to speak to someone like Cecily, who definitely is part of the neurodivergent community, and I thought, wow, this person is not weird. It was quite the opposite. This person thinks like me. And there were at least one or two very scary, not scary, but eerie parallels when Cecily would say that she thought a certain way, and I would just immediately think, hang on, that's the way that I think. And yet you're part of the neurodivergent community. And then, of course, the wheels begin to turn very quickly in my case. And I know I had a friend who I hadn't heard from in a while. I think I put up on Twitter just a kind of a throwaway post saying that I think I might be part of the neurodivergent community, or I might be a little bit different, let's say. And she replied like, yeah, obviously, this is kind of like a surprise to you. So, I mean, it's always kind of obvious to other people, perhaps before it's obvious to ourselves. But I was watching another YouTube video. As I said, I went down the rabbit hole, and because I'm getting my dopamine fix. And I saw that another defining factor of adult ADHD, remember, I'm not hyperactive by any stretch of the imagination, but that you do very well in sort of primary school, early school. You might begin to struggle a little bit in secondary school because the raw intelligence can't just carry you through that. You do need to do more study. And then the wheels can kind of fall off in university when not only do you really have to study because knowledge and there's not so much common sense, but also there's a lot less structure. And apparently that's one thing that ADHD people really do need, is some semblance of a structure. Otherwise, and you can tell me if this resonates with you at all, they procrastinate until the night before. And also the other thing is they have difficulty prioritizing what order to do things in and even setting goals in the first place. And this is something that's always sort of bugged me, is that I'm very good at helping other people set goals, but when it comes to myself, I don't know what to set. It almost seems anathema to me to even set goals in the first place because there's so many things I want to do. And again, another sign that you might have ADHD is that you have a lot of things going on and none of them are finished. And, again, you don't want to self-diagnose. After watching a few of these videos and talking to a couple of people for a very long time, after a while, you see so many things that you go, hang on, that's me, that's me, that's me, that's me. And you begin to wonder. Now, the reason I'm telling you this is one of the things that I think it's difficult to tell whether you have ADHD or a dopamine dysregulation, something wrong with the normal dopamine pathways. And the reason I say this is because if you have an addiction to anything, social media, let's say, is a very prominent one, or video games. What happens is it hijacks your dopamine system. Your dopamine system is kind of the thing that lets you know, hey, keep doing what you're doing because this is on the path to something that you want, which is why goal setting is important, because goal setting literally helps you determine, yes, this is something that I should be doing because it's going to lead me to a goal, which is why not being able to set goals is a big problem. But if you become addicted to something, your dopamine becomes very, very dysregulated. And if you have a huge dopamine spike from something such as playing a video game, or even worse, if you stack dopaminergic activities, for example, if you have a coffee, you have a cold shower, you do an intense workout, you listen to a pumping soundtrack, and then you go and play video games, you have a massive dopamine spike, but everything that goes up must come down. You then have a massive dopamine crash. And then you go down, not back to baseline, but way below baseline. And you start, well, you can imagine, it becomes very, very erratic. And when you are in a state of low dopamine, basically you find it, there's many other things, and I'm by no means an expert, but you would find it very, very difficult to do anything that you didn't really want to do because you lack the motivation. And that's another telltale sign of ADHD is that it's not just difficult for them to do something they don't want to do, they find it pretty much impossible. And that's certainly been the case for me. One of the issues that I've had is doing something once it becomes, in my mind, boring. When it's interesting, when it's a problem to solve, it's got my attention. But as soon as I kind of solve that issue in my head, and once it becomes sort of routine, or you just need to do it consistently, there's not much to solve, you just need to do it, it then becomes very mundane and boring, and I've found it very, very difficult to apply myself in that area. Now, you might, looking from the outside, I don't know how well you know me, but a lot of people will look at what I've done, particularly with the Pageant Project, that's probably how you know me, and go, but you've achieved all this stuff, so you can't possibly have an issue following through. Well, the thing is, and this came to light the other night when I was speaking to this person, was sometimes the stuff you achieve when you have ADHD is stuff you achieved whilst you should have been achieving something else. And again, if that sounds completely foreign to you, I'm happy for you, because it probably means you don't have ADHD, but if this resonates with you, like you should have been doing your uni assignment and yet you somehow learned a new skill. That seems to be another telltale sign of ADHD. And the classic example for me, I mean, there's two that comes to mind. One in the pageant space, which is Confessions of a Pageant Queen. Now, if you don't know, I released that late 2020. It is 1,600 pages long. 1,600 pages long. The longest book you can publish on Amazon is 800 pages. So we needed to break it up into 2 volumes. 1,600 pages, and I turned that around in just over 2 weeks. That is a definition of hyperfocus. I remember not eating much. Like, I'd work the whole day and then realize, crap, it's 10:30 at night and I haven't eaten. I'm still in my pajamas. I haven't brushed my teeth. That's hyperfocus for you. And apparently that level of productivity is not normal. I don't know, because when it's your brain, that's the only brain you've ever had. How would you know? And this is one of the difficulties, and I think realizing something you might need some sort of help, is how would I know that's not normal? Because that's the way I think. It's not like I've had another brain that I can compare it with. But I needed to be told, apparently publishing a 1,600 to 800 page books in 2 weeks is not normal. Good to know. The other thing that's not related to pageantry is actually tennis. I was a tennis coach and played tennis at quite a high level. But the thing a lot of people don't know is I taught myself. And I taught myself to a much higher standard than I think any coach could have, because it was my dopamine fix. I loved tennis. I still love tennis. And to give you an idea, I mean, I had a ball machine. I got this camera software. I got this high-speed video analysis software, which back in the day was thousands of dollars. And I would videotape myself hitting the same shot over and over and over again. And I would be comparing it to these freeze frames of the best players in the world. I would do that again and again and again until I got it right. And I'd wonder, okay, which parts are the important parts of hitting a good shot? Is it where their feet are? Is it where their hips are? Is it where the racket is? And I'd figure that out. And even thinking back to then, if I would tell people what I was doing, a lot of people would be blown away by it. But I think that's because I thought they would never do that. And I'm kind of realizing this now, to them, it would be too much effort. But for me, again, it was that hyper focus over a longer period of time. I was getting my dopamine fix from that. And even after I'd sort of learned to a reasonably high level, I could play tennis. And still to this day, I can play tennis for hours on end and not need to come off the court. I remember having to go through 2 or 3 hitting partners, like pretty high level players. I would go through 2 or 3 of them in a row, and I'd still want to go more because I loved it so much, whereas they were tired and they wanted to throw in the towel. So all these sorts of things have sort of made me come to realize that even if it's not ADHD, and part of this is going to be, do I go to see a doctor or not? And in this case, it's probably seeing a general practitioner to get a referral to a psychiatrist, one who specifically specializes in adult ADHD, because apparently, it's not that sort of a commonly understood condition that you just want to go to any psychiatrist, because it could be quite possible you go to a psychiatrist and says, well, you're not fidgeting, you don't have ADHD, go away. And you want to see someone who has knowledge of adult ADHD, but at the same time, as I said, there's a danger if that label, because it kind of makes you feel important, you want to be diagnosed with it. And so I need to tread that line. But the next step probably involves going to see a doctor of some kind. But also, I need to sort of not go on a dopamine cleanse, although that's a very popular thing to say in this day and age. But I need to look at least trying to repair to some extent my dopamine, restore my natural dopamine patterns. And a lot of that is going to come from stepping away from addictions. And social media for me is one of those. And also with pageantry, like the reason I've been doing interviews for so long and interviewed hundreds of people, that for me is also a dopamine fix. And you say, why? How are you addicted to interviewing? Well, it's because everyone you meet, and I said this the other night, everyone you meet is kind of a puzzle to be solved, at least in my head. And I know that might sound weird or horrible, but it's just me being honest. It's the way that my brain works. Like everyone I meet, they're fascinating to me. Well, most people are fascinating to me in some way, not everyone. But I mean, as I said, like you wouldn't probably be able to tell that sometimes my attention wanders, but it does. But that's why I've been able to do it so long. Like as other things have come and gone, the interviewing and meeting people from around the world, it's always going to hold a special place in my heart because I find it really interesting and fascinating. So it's easy for me to do. But, and this is a big but, there are things that are going sort of sliding that I need to pay attention to. One is my content creation business, for example. The other thing is I'm in the process of starting a business built around AI and reviewing that and coming up, creating content around that, tailored more towards business people and entrepreneurs. So I need to sort of step away from the easy dopamine fix in order to be able to address some of the things that hopefully will give me, at some point, the dopamine back that I would miss from doing interviews. But my point is, when you have an addiction, your dopamine goes out of whack, and it can be very difficult to know what to do, what order to do it in, that prioritization. And you can avoid doing the things you know you should do because your brain forces you to do the thing that's going to give you the dopamine, in this case, the pageant interviews. And I think that's one of the things that really, really struck me, is that people with a dysregulated dopamine system, it doesn't matter how much willpower you have, you just can't follow through. Another video I saw the other day, it said the classic summation is, people with ADHD, you know what to do and you just don't do it. And again, that could apply to a lot of people. But when you start looking at all the symptoms in their totality and you go, hang on, like 95% of them are me. And I thought, that's only me who does that. But hang on, other people think like this. Maybe there's some people who are like me. So long story short, that's going to be a journey that I'm going to go on in some way. I won't lie, it is a bit daunting thinking about going to a doctor, seeing a psychiatrist, potentially going on medication, but I think the payoff would be worth it, because if there's one thing I know about success in life, and I'm sure you know this, it's not just momentary inspiration. It's not just raw talent. You need consistency. Everyone who's achieved anything will tell you about the value of hard work and consistency and doing things even when you don't feel like it. And it's people with a dopamine dysregulation or ADHD, that is the one thing they can't do, is doing things when they don't feel like it. And rather than judging myself for having a lack of willpower or lack of discipline, and being quite envious, frankly, of people who just seem to be able to do the mundane tasks again and again and again, and it's no issue for them, maybe this goes some way to explaining that. And that's why I've decided, okay, I need to take this not more seriously, but this is now to the point where it's not just going to be a label, as I said, that I can take pride from. It may be a gateway to understanding some of the issues that I've been having over the years, particularly with completing things and doing things when I didn't really feel like doing it. Now, along those lines, I will be slowing down on the interview front. I won't be aggressively pursuing new interviews anymore. I still have a few lined up and a few in the works, but taking a step back from that, because one of the things I did want to do was write a pageant book, and this one is going to be basically a pageant survival guide. One of the things I noticed is that over the last few years, probably since the pandemic ended, the viewership in terms of my interviews has gone down. Now, that's overall. I mean, for some interviews, it's still amazingly high, but then on the whole, it's gone down, and people tuning into the live are going down. However, what I've also found is that there seems to be more interest, and I'm just taking this from the metrics. This is not just me thinking it. There seems to be more interest in, you guys seem to have more interest in getting sort of my insights or my advice on pageantry. And I appreciate that. And I can certainly understand that, because you've seen how many people I've interacted with. And just remember, for every interview, there's a conversation that goes on after the interview. And that's where I've learned probably the most about pageantry. And I know probably more in the totality of pageantry than almost anyone out there, because I'm not directly in it. So people will tell me everything. Everyone will tell me everything. And so it all goes into my brain. And again, the ADHD kind of loves that, because it puts it all together into one cohesive web in my head. For a lot of people, it would be very overwhelming. But apparently with ADHD, it's at what they call strategic thinking in Fortune 500 circles anyway. is that you get a whole bunch of information, but an ADHD person can say, that's what it is, or here's the problem. And so a lot of you have expressed more of an interest into it because you've watched more, when I've been going on a rant about what I would like to see done differently in pageantry, or rant about something that I think is wrong, or even not just necessarily calling things out, but pointing out when I think something is wrong with an eye to wanting to see something done about it. So I will, and also I wanted the profits from this pageant survival guide to go towards a non-profit. And Gracie, if you're watching this, now you know probably why it's taken a while to get onto the book, is because of struggling with this behind the scenes in terms of ADHD or dopamine dysregulation, whatever it is. Easy to come up with an idea, difficult sometimes for me to see it through to completion. So if you're seeing a few less interviews, or maybe just a bit less content or different content from me, that will be why. And I would love to hear from you, by the way, if you are part of the neurodivergent community, particularly if you have ADHD. I would love to hear some stories so that I know that I'm not crazy. And I don't mind being crazy. Again, this might be a sign that I really do have ADHD, is that being labeled crazy doesn't bother me. Being labeled typical is more of an issue for me. But if you have stories, particularly of hyperfocus, or stories of how you, medication stories, or what to look for in a psychiatrist and what not to look for. I saw one, because this person I was talking to put me onto this channel, How to ADHD, and the How to HD person, who I think is quite famous now for this YouTube channel, was reading some feedback she'd been sent on her YouTube channel as to how people knew they had ADHD. And one of them that really resonated with me is that you can't be bothered with a conversation because it just doesn't interest you. And so you'd rather stay by yourself, or you kind of know how the conversation is going to play out. So you just like, what's the point of contributing to it? Because this conversation is going nowhere interesting. And I'd rather keep reading my book or stay with my own thoughts. And I thought, wow, I think that probably every day on multiple occasions. And I'm not taking pride in this. It is just the way my brain works. If I see a conversation and it doesn't hold interest for me, I just rather not contribute to it at all. And sometimes I can completely ignore people. Again, I'm not saying that's a good thing, but it's like, I don't feel like answering this because it's such a stupid conversation. And again, it's difficult not to judge myself for that, because I've been brought up and I do believe manners and respect are very important. So it's this really, as I said, it's going to be an interesting journey, and learning not to judge myself for it, and maybe being able to accept parts of myself that certainly aren't perfect. And for a self-confessed perfectionist, that is a difficult path to take, a difficult step to take. But I'm hopeful that some of you will resonate with this birthday message of mine. And I'm sure that a few of you out there are a little weird in the same way that I am. And I'd love to know, I mean, you don't have to comment publicly. If you want to send me a private DM, I'd love that too. But just if you think you might have something going on, or you've been diagnosed with ADHD and you have a story to tell. And I'm not saying that, I'm not looking to set up an interview or anything like that. Maybe one day I will, an ADHD podcast or neurodivergent podcast. I mean, I certainly I heard of worse ideas than that. But it'd just be nice to know how many of you out there have those same weird thoughts that I have, and have a billion skills that you've picked up whilst you should have been doing something else. Like for me, I mean, apart from the tennis, I played violin since the age of 2. Obviously, I know how to edit video. I'm into AI. I can program, I can code, I can design website. I really find marketing fascinating, making money online, the entrepreneurial space. I love psychology. And like, right now I want to learn how to put a car together. One time I decided after watching Gordon Ramsay that I wanted to learn how to poach an egg, and I poached 12 eggs in a row. And then the other thing was, once I had learned how to poach an egg, I had no interest in ever doing it again. This is another thing. Apparently, once you learn how to do something, once you can do it, it then loses all interest for you. There's no dopamine, and then you can never do it again. And that is another thing that went, crap, that's me too. I mean, who poaches 12 eggs in a row? And again, it sounds stupid me saying this now, but you have to realize, to me, it's just like, that's the way my brain has always worked. So I thought that was normal. And after this many conversations, I have slowly begun to realize that maybe, hey, it's not normal. So that's my birthday message to you. I would love to connect with or hear from you if you have ADHD or some sort of other neurodivergent thing going on, because I'd like to see just how different brains work. And even if you don't have ADHD, but you resonate with some of what I've said, it may be that you do have some sort of a dopamine regulatory issue, and maybe there is an addiction to social media or to your phone or to something. It could even be a drug, whatever. It could be caffeine, I don't know. But I just like to know that, and I'd like to offer you that you're not by yourself, and that you're not crazy, and that actually you might be crazy, but in a good way, and that there are other crazy people like you out there. Because the flip side is so beneficial as well. Like, as I said, I put out a 1,600-page book. I published it in 2 weeks. That is an amazing skill to be able to do. And I don't think that's something that most neurotypical people could do. Because you'd be like, oh, I need to do this. And then by this month, then I'll do this. And then this month I'll do this. And then by this month I'll do this. Whereas for me, it's like, I'm going to do it. 2 weeks later, I've done it. And then after that, I'm never doing that again. So that's my birthday message to you. Please reach out. I'd love to hear your stories. If this doesn't resonate with you, hey, I'm happy for you too. I don't like to view neurotypical people as boring. I will say, in all honesty, sometimes having conversations with people who speak really slowly is incredibly frustrating, because my brain has just like gone 5,000 stops down the road and it forgets to come back sometimes. But also, if you see a bit less in the way of interviews, and you see different content or less content or a combination of both, that will be why. And also, I want to be working behind the scenes to get this book done, because I really think this pageant survival guide is something that needs to be out there. So yeah, that's my birthday message to y'all, as my Texan, my Southern friends would say. Have a good day, take care of yourselves, and I will see you later.